Everyone. Welcome to Senior Lecture Series. I know this is a little unusual for us, but nonetheless, we're very excited today to have Chef Frank Stitt in class. This Conversations on Leadership will take us from his start, from his inspiration, all the way through to where he sees us going in the future from, with respect to Alabama, culinary, works, as well as advice that he can pass on to you all as seniors graduating in a couple of months. He might be no stranger to a lot of us, and we were delighted to have Chef at lunch earlier, and I found him to be one of the most humblest persons, genuinely caring about food and the role of food for individuals. I'll quickly read a short bio for Chef Frank Stitt for you. Chef Frank Stitt's fondness for Southern ingredients comes from his roots in rural Cullman, Alabama, where he developed an early spiritual connection to food, the land, and to farming. His culinary journey began to take shape when he moved to San Francisco, where he honed his kitchen skills at various restaurants, including the now legendary Chez Panisse. Stitt eventually made his way back to the South and returned to the foods and traditions of his childhood. Today, those roots combine with his culinary experiences and adventurous spirit to create a singular, deeply rich, and passionate approach to food. His flagship restaurant, Highlands Bar and Grill, has been nominated for the prestigious James Beard Award for Outstanding Restaurant each year since 2009. And you have now received a 10th semifinal nod from the James Beard Award Committee. Stitt received the Foundation's Award for Best Chef in the Southeast in 2001, and was nominated in 2008 for Outstanding Chef. He also received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Southern Foodways Alliance and was inducted into Alabama Academy of Honor in 2009, the most distinguished award given to an Alabamian. And last fall, for the Hospitality Gala, we were delighted to bestow the 2007 Horst Schulze Award for Excellence in Hospitality to Chef Frank Stitt. So without further ado, our program for today will be a little different from what we're accustomed to. Again, I'll be asking Chef Stitt a couple questions between now and 3:35 exactly. I have my timekeeper in the back, Samira, who will give me the nod when we are approaching that, because we do want to be very inclusive and to have questions from the floor. And I know that a few of you will have some very profound questions for Chef Stitt, and he is prepared to share his perspectives on those questions. We have a floor mic in the center here, so at that point in time, I'll invite you all to step forward to the mic to ask your questions, and don't be too timid at all. So the first question I have for Chef Stitt is, what is it about food and its social impact on people, whether an individual, a group, or in a family setting, that drew you to becoming a chef?
Well, shall I call you Professor D?
Dr. D.
Dr. D. Dr. D. Dr. D. Well, it's great to be here with you. I really enjoyed this little bit of time that we've had to get together and spend time together. And I just was all of these questions that you have are all so fascinating. And so I hope that there are a lot of these things that we can get into. I wish we almost had more time, but I really look forward to being here with you and exchanging ideas and giving you some things from my perspective. You know, and this goes back to, I think, maybe all of us in some way or another, those special moments that we had as a child at our family dining table. My mother and my father, my brother and sister, excuse me, we were it was very important that we had dinner together. My mother was an incredible cook, and so we, it was a time that we sat down. It was a time that we shared ideas, we talked, and and I think some of us maybe romanticize that, but in this case, I think romanticizing that time of being at table is not a bad thing. And those traditions of having food together, and that was when, you had to try everything. I remember one time I was being a jerk, and I didn't thank my mom for dinner. And I remember my dad taking his alligator belt off and giving me a whipping after that. And I thought, well, I won't let that happen again. And so there was certainly an understanding that somebody had been in the kitchen cooking and taking a lot of time and energy to prepare this food, and it was just for one's health and well-being, physical and spiritual. And so that certainly has something that was important to me. And I think, like most of you, Thanksgiving was this day of coming together with family and your cousins and your aunts and uncles, and of having all of this incredible food that your parents had taken days in preparing, and it was just this wild celebration of that cornbread dressing and all of those good things. And so that was certainly happy times. And I do believe that my mother expressed her love of life and of us through her food. And it was, after breakfast she would start, working on lunch, and after lunch, she'd be in the garden, or she'd be, then preparing dinner. So that comes to me in a real natural way. I ran away from Alabama as soon as I could, right after high school, and went to Tufts. I wanted to be in a big city, and I wanted to be in an area where it was different than what I'd grown up with. And I wanted to study alternate means of dispute resolution, which was to try to reform the legal system so that it would be a more just world. After working at an attorney's office in an interim, I realized that maybe I was being a little too ideal, and that the legal thing was not something that immediately appealed to me, and ended up at UC Berkeley studying philosophy. And to me, one of the great things that you were doing is getting a liberal arts education. And at me as an employer and as an entrepreneur, one of the most important things is that ability to communicate, to creatively find solutions, and to have that drive to want to learn more. And so if you have all of those things, then you're going to be a very, very valuable person, whether you're as an entrepreneur or working in another organization. And so those things, and how practical was it to study philosophy at UC Berkeley? I mean, I was not going to be a philosophy professor, but I knew that just by pursuing knowledge, one thing would lead to another. And so one of the things there that I learned was a confidence to pursue something just because of the integrity of it. And if I was being honest, and if I could do something and work hard, and it could be an honorable thing. And so cooking is what I kind of fell into because of the excitement of the restaurants and the kitchen and the ability to create and to share that. And that's part of why I think most people become cooks.
Excellent. Following on the lines of what philosophy taught you and the integrity, what can you speak to the culture that you've been able to foster, and how you try to protect and maintain that culture in your restaurants so that the team has that level of integrity about what they're serving and how they're serving it to guests?
Yeah. One of the most important, influential people to me was a junior high school football coach. And as trite as that sounds, I mean, this is a guy that would pick you up when you made a good play and kind of just screaming to everybody, you know, did you see that play? And it was something that was physical, and that ability to be a coach and to celebrate, but you know, he would really make you feel terrible when you did something wrong. And so I've tried to accentuate the former more than the latter, but I certainly see my position as being the coach that is preaching consistency and quality and the pursuit of excellence. And by setting the example in the kitchen and by creating an atmosphere of respect. And this is something that those words seem kind of
Cliche,
maybe cliched, but it comes from having respect from the farmer that grows those lettuces. And so when he comes to the back door, you know, I try to go out of my way to make him realize, or her, how much I appreciate the work that he put into making these lettuces that wonderful. And so I will take him around and introduce him to all the cooks. And sometimes, in fact, tomorrow we're having one of our farmers do a presentation to the front of the house staff. And so that respect that you show to the dishwasher, to the farmers, is expected from one staff member to the other. And so you've got to look somebody at the eye, and you've got to acknowledge them, say good morning, say hello. You've got to have that kind of decency and kind of a gracious kindness. And if you don't, you're not really going to be that welcome. I mean, in our team. And one of the things that I do believe is that even if the people that spend some time in our kitchen and they learn from us, whatever they do, if it's not involved with food or restaurants, but that insistency of respect and a kindness will go with you wherever you are and in whatever your work environment is. And I remember early on, and we were talking about this earlier, there was a fellow who was a prep cook, dishwasher, who was an out-and-out racist, and he would say and do demeaning things. And you know, I confronted this straight up in front of everybody and set the tone that this was not going to happen. And so sometimes you do have to be willing to take a stand and say, this is not, you can't be just, you know, you can't accept things that are not right. And in the past, I've made clients, patrons, guests leave if they were being disrespectful of a server out front. And so I think that when I've had 3 people that have been with me since day one for 35 years that have worked with me that long. We have over 25 people that have worked with me for over 15 years. And so that we do have our own culture. And so some of these folks will insist upon those things when I'm down here talking to you. So hopefully that's being maintained while I'm away.
That's great. Some leaders lead from behind, some lead from in front, some lead in the middle or in the thick of things. How would you describe your leadership style?
Well, for the first 8 years, I was on the line cooking day and night, pretty much every day. And so there was, I was on saute, and there was John Washington, who was on the grill. And so we had this dance so that we never, ever bumped into one another. And so it was just this very much a natural thing for me to be there. As I've opened Bottega and Bottega Cafe and Chez Fonfon, I can't be everywhere, I can't be on the line. And so my job is to is to lead by doing the menu, by working on a dish, by directing it, by tasting together. And you'd be surprised at when we're doing, say, a special event, we will plate it, we will taste it, we will criticize every element of it. How is the salt? How is the acid? How is the fat? How is the temperature? How is the texture? How is the composition? And so one of the great things that I certainly love is that composing. We get an opportunity, it's like the food we had today at lunch. It was so wonderful, it was so well thought out and composed, and so we get to have this little artist thing that we get to share and then people hopefully enjoy, but you can't do it conceptually. You have to taste and adjust, and that's going to be the difference between an okay place and a really extraordinary place, is that ability to adjust at the last moment. And it doesn't matter whatever design work you're doing, it really does take that. How does it work? How does it get from on your fork? How does it get in your mouth? How does it feel in your mouth? And then you've got to be really just objective and critical, with those decisions.
Some great points, and that leads nicely into the next question. It's a two-part question, essentially. For the leadership style that you have fostered across your concepts, was there a distinct experience or a distinct person and or a distinct place that helped to shape the way how you approach leading your teams across the different concepts?
My father as a surgeon was a very demanding person. General surgeons, they have people's life in their hands. They open up people's chests, and they've got to deal very decisively with knowledge and with professionalism and get in and get out. And I really, really respect that so much. I was not, after I used to spend time in the operating room with my dad, I so admire that. But I think that for me, that was not something there's a whole lot of horror and pain and agony and sickness as well as health in being a doctor. But I think cooking is something that you can accentuate more of the loving, the positive, the good part of our life. And so that pursuit of excellence and not taking any compromises is something that I think is very, very important. And I think that sometimes people don't understand that when you are trying to make decisions and you're making them based on the overall, the good. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something to try to teach people on a consistent basis, is that you really, it's kind of like a Star Wars and Obi-Wan Kenobi. You've got to be going for the good. And I think that when you get people with you going in that direction, then the really great things happen.
Very good. What attributes or personal traits do you think are most important to being an effective leader in the culinary field?
Consistency. There are a lot of people can do something one time and it's good and it's a success and you make money and everybody does that, but to make those baked grits every time with the best quality organic stone ground grits that you can, and you constantly search out the best quality vinegar, and you chop your shallots just right, and you have sprigs of fresh thyme, and you have bay leaves, and you have a little ham trim in the reduction, and everything that goes into making a simple dish, you have to be really consistent. And you know, you have to show up, you have to be there. Right now, I'm struggling with this guy on garde manger, and he seems like he really is intent on sending out lukewarm grits to folks, and so I have to catch that, and I have to send it back, and we redo it. And so, you know, I think a lot of people would lose patience with being there and making your performance be consistent. You know, you think about these Olympic athletes and you know, that push themselves, and I think that's just a great role model to whatever you do, is just to try to strive to be the best that you can be at that.
Great. Traditions that you do with your team when you're creating a menu, and you know, you do that composition. It's a team effort. Everyone gets together, they taste together, they critique and evaluate, and you come out with something great. Are there any other traditions that you practice with your staff before service or after service that helps to, you know, to show them how much you care about how they are respecting the place of work and the function that they have and the integrity that they build into their service techniques?
You know, with lineup, with the waiters meeting, I tend to be there every day at 4:30, and usually I'm there at either Fonfon or Bottega Cafe at 10:30 in the morning. And so, say, for those of you that haven't been to either of any of our restaurants, you know, I'm fascinated by the culture and the sociology, the people of where these restaurants represent. At Chez Fonfon, it's a French bistro, and so I love to share stories about the restaurants, the history of a dish. If we're doing a seafood stew that's from Normandy, and it has apple cider and a little Calvados and leeks and apples and cream and snapper that's poached with shrimp and mussels, and you know, to try to tell a little bit of the history of that area of where that dish is from, and so that people can begin to understand that. And similarly at Bottega, to say, okay, in Rome, in a trattoria, you're going to have this carbonara, and it's going to be some rendered pork fat, and it's going to be some cream, and it's going to be a farm egg yolk, and it's going to be some pecorino, but all of that has to be blended together, and it's so simple, and you've got to make it, you know, just so you swoon when you taste it, but there's a story, there's a history behind it. And the same thing at, so I love the culinary history of a dish, the inspiration, and trying to build up that image of where it came from. And then we may take a riff on it, we may go a different area, and we may combine some, you know, some sorghum syrup or something that is coming from the farm that day that has another little thing. But I love the history and the cultural aspect of what we do. And of course, if we're good, then you as a guest, when you come in, and the server is able to convey some of those things to you, and that maybe he'll suggest a wine or a beer that goes with it that would be have some connectedness to that. And so I love that cultural, historical connection, and so with our lineups, I often will go into kind of the history of those dishes.
And that sounds like it does have a immediate and direct impact on that experience the guest will have, with the server being able to share more than, oh, this is a dish that's, you know, done this way. There's some history to it. The next question has to deal with the James Beard Award. So this year, the announcement went out a couple days ago, essentially, and so Highlands Bar and Grill has once again made it to the semifinal round. This is year 10, so 10 consecutive years in a row. Usually the old adage is 3 times a charm. What are the unique attributes for the restaurant concept, Highlands Bar and Grill, that keeps it getting nominated? Mm. And what does it really take to finally receive that award?
Mm-hmm. Well, how many of y'all here are familiar with the Beard Awards? Some of you are. Some of you aren't. So the James Beard Foundation started to really honor and celebrate, kind of like the Academy Awards for cooking and for journalism. And so there is a regional award for chefs, the South, the Southeast. I think I was nominated 6 or 7 times for Outstanding Chef of the South. So you get this wonderful tradition at that time of going to New York. You meet all your friends. You go out and have great lunches and dinners together, and you drink plenty of great wine. And then there's the black tie event, at Lincoln Center. And so I got to do maybe it was 8 years as a chef, and so now it's the 10th year, and it's moved to Chicago. And so a group of about 8 of our staff members. Now, this would be totally tacky and crass and kind of brag about this thing that we've gotten to do. The last couple of years, a friend who had more NetJet miles than he could use flew us up in this private jet, and so it was so much fun. It's a great honor to be nominated and to be a finalist. Where there are 5 folks that are nominated. So in this case, for Outstanding Restaurant in America, which is just it kind of it boggles my mind to think that we would make that. But all the restaurants in America, all the places that have infinitely more money and resources and more beautiful silver and plates and glasses, but for us to be up for that is really I'm just blown away by it every year. Now, the thing is with voting, I get to vote since I won the award for Outstanding Chef a long time ago. And so when you vote, you have to make a pledge that you have eaten at that restaurant within the last 18 months, or you're not supposed to vote for them. And so, to me, that's never going to happen. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but it's very unlikely that there will be thousands of voters that have come to Birmingham, Alabama, as opposed to the other restaurants that are in New York or Chicago or San Francisco or LA or Miami or Atlanta or New Orleans, where, let's face it, people travel to those cities or live in those cities way more than they're in, or we short time. But anyway, so I just find it just such an incredible honor to make it to the finals. And unless somebody rigs the vote in our favor, I don't see how it's going to happen.
So does the second part of that question have any merit? And that has to do with no pressure, but Highlands gets the award this year. What would that do to your staff morale, the local Birmingham community, and the state of Alabama?
Well, I think part of what your question, or I read into it, was, there are these chefs that commit suicide or because they lost a star, or now the expectations are so high that will that be, disruptive? And honestly, we do what we do because we love what we do. We're committed to it, and we'll continue doing that. And so that, I don't control those awards. All we can do is to try to be as great as we can possibly be. And at the end of the day, you know, if we do that, then I'm happy.
Okay. All right. I think we have maybe five more minutes. Okay. So I'll try to ask two more questions. And one of the questions has to do, following up with the award piece. I'm not certain if you're very familiar with a French restaurant, Alecia, and they have 3 Michelin stars. They've had it for I think 19 years, and the French chef Sebastien Brass in fall of last year said, I don't want to have this honor anymore. He essentially asked the Michelin folks to strip his restaurant off the 3 Michelin stars because he said what you spoke to earlier about consistency, making sure that every plate that comes out, there's a judge, there's someone who's going to be critical of that work, if you will. And so he didn't want the pressure. He didn't want any more of that, and he wanted to be a little bit more free and creative. And chefs are very creative individuals. So having that restriction was something that he'd like to get rid of after 19 years. So he wants to remove that. And my question had to deal with, you know, if you got that James Beard Award for Most Outstanding Restaurant this year, the notoriety and the pressure and the celebrity or the celebration that comes with that and the extra scrutiny that comes with that as well, you know, is there any likely change to leading as a result of that notoriety?
You know, the Michelin star system is something that is so big and powerful in Europe primarily. Who all here is kind of familiar with the Michelin system? Well, great. So to me, let me back into this. To me, a great 1-star or a 2-star Michelin restaurant is where I like to be. You know, if you're a 1-star trying to be a 2-star, or when you get to that 3-star level, it's so much formality and all the silver and all the courses, and it's so expensive and it's so grand, and everybody's trying to act like you're Louis XIV. I mean, it's just this over-the-top thing. What I love are those restaurants that are much more of a Michelin 1-star, maybe just barely a 2-star, that where they still are more country than they are city. That, sure, there's a lovely tablecloth and there's nice silver, but it's not just everyone bowing down to you all the time. So when you do get that Michelin 3rd star, people will travel all across the world to eat there, and then they are going to be super critical. I would not strive to ever be a Michelin 3-star restaurant. You know, I adore those places. There's a place, La Merenda, outside the market in Nice. And the guy used to be at a 3-star restaurant, and he took over this place. It's maybe got 20 seats. It's kind of these picnic table benches. And he does this Provençal food that you just cry. It is so good. And it's just with the pesto that's made in a mortar and a pestle, and they put that whole thing down on the table and serve that in your soup or with your pasta. And it's just in the stockfish where they make a seafood stew that they use the insides of the fish, the liver and everything. And so though there's so much that I love about restaurant experiences that are not at that fanciest end. And so I like for you to feel very, very special when you come to our restaurants. And I want you to think that this may be and I want you to believe that this is the best food you've ever had, but it's going to be a more convivial space. And so I certainly understand his perspective of saying, no, I don't want to be under a microscope. You know, and that's another thing that, you know, from my perspective, I'm not a fan of the this technical cooking of turning things into foams and gels and powders, and that to me is the opposite of why I do what I do. You know, that's not to say that there's some people that can do that and they can be successful and it's interesting, but that's a performance art that I don't want to perform.
Chef is clapping in the back. We have some time for questions. So if you have any questions, I'll invite you to the mic to ask Chef Stitt some of your questions. And while you're making your way to the mic, I can ask a question since we don't have anyone readily jumping up right now, because I've got other questions too. But please, Genevieve, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm from Homewood, so I visited all your restaurants and seen kind of Birmingham grow up. So I was just gonna say, or like think, how do you, sorry, how do you think that the restaurant industry in Birmingham and your restaurant specifically have impacted economic development in Birmingham?
Yeah. Well, I think that the deal for Mercedes to come to Alabama was pretty much signed upstairs at Bottega. And similarly, when Honda was scored, they did most of the negotiation at Highlands. Or not most of the negotiation, but a lot of what allowed people to see that Alabama was a relatively okay place to be was because of that experience, the professionalism, the quality, the vitality of the room, all of the Birmingham community that you know that comes to our restaurants every day. There is a spirit and an energy to me that says this is Alabama now. And I think that kind of economic force is something that we've been certainly the benefactor of. But because of our pursuit of excellence, I think that people have chosen Alabama. So thank you very much.
Feel free to line up behind the mic.
Hey, Chef. How are you?
Great.
Sweet. So I got a couple questions. For someone who wants to open their own restaurant, which is like a big dream of mine, I don't know when I want to do it, but at some point. What would you say is like the first real step you took to opening up your restaurant? Like, did someone come to you and say like, I would love to back you up, I saw you did at this other restaurant you worked for, or did you have to go out and like talk to your family and friends, knock on doors, like where did you start?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier in an interview, and for me, at the time I was working at a restaurant at Hugo's at the Hyatt, their fancy restaurant at the top of the Hyatt Hotel in Birmingham. And I was also working at a wine shop, and I was making connections there. And I was also teaching some cooking classes at a little place in Mountain Brook. And doing all of those things allowed me to reach out to a lot of the Birmingham public, and especially through the cooking classes, that some folks could see my passion, my excitement, my drive for opening a restaurant. And so I was able to get some investors that put in $5,000, and so I was able to do that along with help from my mom and from a bank to loan me the money. And so being a part of the community is so important, and trying to figure out what the community needs. And I think that when you do that, and then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, that answers it for sure. Mm-hmm. Appreciate it. And then, so based off of that first question, like when you open your second restaurant, because I know when you're a chef, you kind of only feel like you're a chef when you're in the kitchen. So when you opened up that second restaurant, did it make you feel distant from both, or how did you find that balance to be able to still be the head chef of both restaurants?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is a little bit, because your team in the first kitchen, you know, you're Papa Bear, you are Daddy, you're Coach, you're the one that's supposed to be there, and I love that about it. And luckily for me, it's 3 blocks apart, and so I've got a little Vespa. I can zip up back and forth pretty quickly.
Awesome.
And so I would try to be there for those meetings, go over the things, run back, be at the other one, run back a few hours later, be with the guys there. And so that I hopefully could be a part of fine-tuning, developing those dishes, so that they could see that, you know, that I was still there, carrying part of it, talking about purveyors. We're going to buy the crawfish from this guy. We're going to buy the asparagus from this guy. And so I think that for me, I need to spread myself out that way. Now, at that time, I had some key people that wanted more responsibility. They wanted more money. And so it made it a little easier for me to expand there. Now we're in a crunch. Need y'all to come apply and work with us at our restaurants. You know, we really should be open on Monday at Bottega, and we're not. And we're because we're in a bit of a shortage of staff. And so we need to be able to take that management break of jumping up and doing that. Now, we also, when I opened I was able to pay off my investors after 3.5 or 4 years at Highlands. They got 2.5 times. If they gave me $10,000, they got $25,000 back 4 years ago. That was a time of high interest rates. But you know, those same people that invested in the first restaurant all wanted to invest in the second restaurant. And I did the same thing there and was able to pay them back. And so that's how it worked for me. And I think that, you know, it's going to depend on your charisma and your honesty and your ability to convince people that you're going to be there and you're going to make it work.
Thank you.
Great questions, Jess. And that your last question actually flows nicely into one of the other questions that I had for Chef Stitt, and that had to do with succession planning. So there are these many concepts that you have, and you talk about being Papa Bear, I love that phrasing. You talk about being Papa Bear at Highlands, and you know, having to also spread yourself now thin across the other concepts. What does succession planning look like for you for the concepts? Is there life after you decide to retire and step away from the limelight of the culinary world?
Well, let me tell you conceptually. You know, not do as I say, not as I do. I think that the concept that really works the best is that to bring a young sous chef along, and a young front of the house general manager who would be in position to take over ownership, and then to be under my wife Pardis tutelage for a number of years, and to just gradually transition that, and so that they're I think in this case, an outside investor would step up to the plate to help buy some of the assets as it's transitioned to an operating general manager and an operating sous chef who would see this as an incredible opportunity to take over an existing restaurant and to carry it forward and to make it more of their own over time. And so I think that Jim and Nick's, I think often will have a operating partner, And as they begin with a smaller percentage of ownership, and as each year it grows more and more and more. And so I think that that's really the workable way.
Okay, good. So we probably have 5 or so more minutes to go. And in these last few minutes, I'd like for Chef Stitt to give some parting words for you as seniors looking to graduate, looking to make your own imprint on whichever segment of the hospitality industry that you'll go in. So what advice would you give to the students here? Most are 21, at least 21 years old. And you know, it could be advice that you would have given your own 21-year-old self, but looking at the outlay of what we have to be excited about, whether in Alabama or just, you know, across America, what is that? What are some of those success tips that you'd have to share with the students?
Well, to be able to work with something that is doing good, that you're recycling, that you are promoting humane animal husbandry, that you are supporting local organic farmers, and so that your enterprise is touching and making a difference. And that's something that you can go to sleep with and be proud of, that you're making an impact because you are fighting the good fight, that you are helping this world, helping the environment, and that you're being a fair and honest person. You know, this goes back to my existential philosophy of trying to be as authentic and in pursuing that with genuine sincerity, then you don't have to worry, you know, if you're always honest and if you're trying to do the best. I think that pursuit of quality for me means that you try to learn from the smartest, best people in a particular field, and then you go one step further. Who was their mentor? And then you learn from them. What were the books that influenced them? What were the cookbooks that influenced, you know, the Trois Gros and the Alain Chapelles? And then you go back, and so to pursue knowledge and with a great hunger is something that I think is extremely important, in that you're constantly peeling back the onion to get to an inner layer. And that kind of curiosity is something that is you need to support and nurture within yourself. You know, golly, I was thinking of, I was living in Paris, and I'd just broken up with a girlfriend, and I hitchhiked from Paris down to the south of France, and I slept along the side of the road 2 nights to get down there. Just luckily in the south of France there were some vineyards I could kind of sleep in between the vines on before going to work at a vineyard. And I'd made this connection through Stephen Spurrier. He had l'Académie du Vin, which was a wine school in Paris, and he did the great tasting of Paris, and I just happened to wander into his shop one day and kind of speaking French. He was an Englishman, but we became friends, and so that connection led to him offering me a job at one of his friends, a winemaker. Then that led for me hitchhiking down there and living in this little town in the south of France for 3 weeks. I happened to meet somebody at a cafe that let me live in their house, and it was the first week of just picking grapes, with the folks from North Africa and Eastern Europe, and it was just trying to show off and work harder than anybody else. And then the next week they let me in the cellar, and so I got to spend 2.5 weeks in the cellar. And so don't be afraid of taking some risk and doing some things that are slightly uncomfortable so that you can learn, so that you can be involved with somebody who's doing something of integrity and quality. And, those little gambles or those little risks almost help build your character and your ability to see things. I remember this morning, it was, we would meet before dawn and we'd be out in the vineyard picking these grapes, and I had this incredible experience that this is one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been in my life, September in the south of France. And it made me think a little bit about the childhood of being at my grandparents' farm and of picking vegetables and strawberries and asparagus and things like that there, and that as exotic as this place was, that there was a connectedness to that experience just in my own backyard where I grew up. And so you can create your own world of beauty and experience when you really get connected to where you are.
We unfortunately are out of time, but one of the key things I just wanted to reiterate from what you just said for the students. So technically you do graduate from Auburn with a degree, but you never truly graduate because you are a forever student. A professional in our field is someone who will study and be religious about that pursuit of knowledge within the field. If you want to make it to the top, you never put down the book. You never stop reading the trade magazines. You never stop seeing what the trends are. You are forever students. So you have to be bonded to that exercise or that practice of finding knowledge and finding ways you get to the top. And with that said, unfortunately, we thank you so much for the short space of time, but the impact of the statements and the journey that you've shared with us. I learned a lot and enjoyed hearing you share your perspective, and I hope that everyone else here will have benefited in that many ways and more from having you with us today. So thank you so much, Chef Stitt. I really appreciate
it. One last perspective. I think all of y'all, you must recognize it, but you've got a real rock star, amazing person right here. And so, Dr. D, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was totally unexpected. I don't know how to rock it out, but I can try. Thank you all.
Okay.
All right.